It's that time again. The leaves are falling, the jack-o'-lanterns are lit, and I've got a stack of books ready to read for this Halloween. To begin with, let me apologize for not getting this video published by the 1st of October. That was the goal, and it just didn't happen. My schedule is just completely overbooked and cattywampus, both over the last several weeks and the upcoming weeks through the entire Halloween season. It seems like every time I have an hour off from one project, I'm filling it with another project. So a lot of things are happening, but some of the YouTube things unfortunately just happened a bit slower than I prefer. Never to fear, however. Though a little later than I originally intended, I do indeed have a great list of books to read this Halloween season. As usual, some of these I have read and some of them I have not. The ones I've read, I'm actively recommending and rereading this month. The others, I'm recommending a little lighter in the sense that they sound good to me and I'm reading them this month, but I can't necessarily vouch for everything that's in them, but you can read them along with me. And that's part of the fun of these reading lists for me, because y'all get to read some of these books at the same time as I'm reading them. Let me encourage you to turn the comments section into a sort of book club. Leave your thoughts and feel free to discuss. Just do us all a favor and clearly label any spoilers if you write any. I'll also be leaving purchase links to all of these books down in the What's It, along with links to all the other projects that have been keeping me so busy, so you can check out all my stuff as well as checking out these books for yourselves. This year I've chosen 10 books. Normally I read well more than that in a month, but like I said, I'm running behind this year, so this is all I can manage. These run the gamut of all kinds of Halloween books. We have some scary horror books as well as some that are just more fun to read around the fall. Some are fiction, some are non-fiction, and some are both. So let's dive right into the literary spookiness. First up is one that I'm not counting as one of my 10, and that's because it's the only one I've recommended on one of these lists before. In fact, I've recommended it every year on these Halloween reading lists because I reread it, at least in part, every October, and that's the October Dreams anthology from Cemetery Dance. It features short stories, non-fiction articles, poems, and memoirs, and I think those last ones are actually my favorite part. It's really a load of fun to read about wonderful Halloween memories from some of our favorite horror authors, and the entire anthology is a real treasure, so I'm recommending it just as I always do. But to get to the list of the 10 that I haven't recommended before, I can think of no better place to start than with Dracula by Bram Stoker. But not just any version of Dracula, because though it is a horror novel and great for Halloween reading, it's not necessarily Halloween specific. However, this is a rather special year for Dracula. Stoker's classic novel was originally published in 1897, so this year, 2022, marks its 125th anniversary. That's a remarkable thing. It's wonderful that we're still reading it all these years later. And this year also marks the publication of a special 125th anniversary edition of the book, which you see here. This edition includes an extended ending as well as the short story Dracula's Guest, which was originally published along with Dracula but eventually removed by the publishers, along with a special introduction by Bram Stoker's great-grandnephew, Dacre Stoker, who currently manages the Stoker estate. He signed my copy, and I'm not sure if these autographed ones are available anymore, but the book is still available for order. Let me go ahead and read the description off the back for you. For 125 years, Dracula has been thrilling and inspiring generations of readers. This is the classic vampire novel, reprinted along with Dracula's Guest, once included in the manuscript of Dracula, plus an extended ending to the novel that was deleted from the final typescript. So not only is it worth revisiting the classics from time to time, but this edition has some extras I suspect most of you won't have ever read before. I don't know whether that really adds all that much to the story, because Dracula itself is such an almost perfect book, but it's like a DVD packed with extra features. We enjoy them just for their own sake. Next up is one I had originally placed on this list months ago in anticipation of a film adaptation, and that's Dark Harvest by Norman Partridge. Unfortunately, I have no idea what happened with the movie. It was originally set to come out last year, but was delayed by the pandemic. Understandable, I suppose. It was then scheduled for a wide theatrical release this September 9th, but was ultimately pulled from the release schedule without any fanfare or explanation, so I honestly have no idea what MGM and United Artists are doing, or when we'll finally get to see it. But I've gone ahead and kept the book on the reading list anyway, so that we can all make sure we've read it and are ready to go whenever the movie does become available. Norman Partridge's book came out in the mid-2000s and really does have that sort of quintessential Halloween feeling to it. My copy, this copy, is the Cemetery Dance Limited Edition, which is limited to 2,000 copies, and it's an autographed edition. And this came out back in 2006, and I think this was the first edition of the book. Good luck finding one of these for sale anywhere. But different versions of the book are still readily available, so you'll have no problem finding a copy. Let me go ahead and read the description off the flap of this one for you. A Midwestern town. You know its name. You were born there. It's Halloween night, 1963. Every boy between the ages of 16 and 19 has been locked up for the last 5 days. Now starving and wild, they're hitting the streets armed with baseball bats, pitchforks, and 2x4s studded with nails. They're ready to go nose to nose with a legend. He's the reaper that grows in a cornfield, the merciless trick with a heart made of treats, the butchering nightmare with a jack-o'-lantern face. He's the October boy, and he visits your town every Halloween, ready to run a gauntlet of young men anxious to carve his beating candy heart from his chest. Mitch Crenshaw and his gang burn rubber in a street rod with Gorgon headlights. Pete McCormick's on the move with a stolen .45, and a hunted girl is out there too, making her break on the one night of the year when no rules apply. You're running with them, threading your own path through danger and moonlight, shadowing a sadistic cop and packs of brutal teenagers who'll attack anyone who gets in their way. Because this is your town. You understand its secrets, and you want a ringside seat on the night it all comes tumbling down. Norman Partridge returns to Cemetery Dance with a high-octane tale of fantastic suspense. Startlingly original in style and execution, Dark Harvest is sure to be the horror event this Halloween season. Don't miss it. So that's the Cemetery Dance description. Different publishers may have slightly different versions, but that gives you a pretty good idea of what it's about. And I think a safe way to describe this is that it takes those youthful Halloween traditions of yesteryear, the kind of thing we all read about in Ray Bradbury novels, and twists it not only into a nostalgic tale for adults, but also into more of a true horror story rather than something like a dark fantasy. But while we're on the subject, it's just not October or Halloween without reading some Bradbury. Almost without fail, I choose at least one Ray Bradbury book to read or to reread each Halloween season, and this year is no exception. For 2022, I've selected The Halloween Tree, probably the great author's most direct treatment of Halloween, even though so much of his work has become almost synonymous with the season. Let me read you the description of this one. On Halloween night, 8 trick-or-treaters gather at the haunted house by the edge of town, ready for adventure. But when something whisks their friend Pip away, only one man can help the boys find him. Join the sinister Carapace Clavicle Mound Shroud as he takes them on an unforgettable journey through space and time, deep into the mysteries of this spookiest of all nights. Can the boys save Pip before it's too late? The remarkable thing about this book is that, as short as it is, coming in at just around 150 pages, that journey through space and time manages to trace a lot of the history of Halloween and Samhain. And to me, that's really important. We all love Halloween, admittedly some of us more than others, but as much fun as we have with our costumes and candy and giving each other a good scare, it's also important to respect our history and our traditions, and I think the Halloween tree is perhaps Bradbury's way of saying the same thing. The next one I've selected isn't a novel, but a cookbook of all things. That's this charming little book called A Zombie Ate My Cupcake by Lily Vanilli. This is an author I wasn't familiar with until somebody I know introduced me to this book, and I found it quite entertaining. It consists of recipes for cupcakes designed to look like horrifying things. I've made cupcakes that look like they have broken glass in them before, and a similar recipe is in this book. But it also has 24 other strange cupcake designs. Let me flip through and give you a couple of examples. Here's a recipe for mummy cupcakes. Here are some that look like tombstones. And here are some that look like they have worms on them, and that's just to name a few. I always like to include some books that offer us lessons on other things we can do to enhance the Halloween season, so this cupcake book seemed like a perfect choice. Admittedly, I haven't tried all of the recipes yet, but I did find the book quite charming just to read. I also have a feeling that my out-of-control schedule probably means I won't get around to making a Halloween cooking video this year, so hopefully this book recommendation makes up for my own lack of culinary creepiness for this Halloween season. The next two sort of go together. I'm a member of a book club that used to read horror novels every month, but now we read together more occasionally. However, we always have something to read around Halloween. The book club is organized by somebody else on YouTube on the Chapter Stacks channel, and I'll leave the relevant links down in the What's It for anyone interested. But for this video, the important thing is just that I have 2 book club selections that I haven't read yet, but will be reading this month for book club. The first of those is The Children on the Hill by Jennifer McMahon. I've actually started this one already and should be finishing it soon, so while I can't say too much yet, I can say at least that I'm enjoying it so far. Let me go ahead and read this description for you. From the New York Times bestselling author of The Drowning Kind comes a genre-defying new novel, inspired by Mary Shelley's masterpiece Frankenstein, that brilliantly explores the eerie mysteries of childhood and the evils perpetrated by the monsters among us. 1978. At her renowned treatment center in picturesque Vermont, the brilliant psychiatrist Dr. Helen Hildreth is acclaimed for her compassionate work with the mentally ill. But when she's home with her cherished grandchildren, Violet and Eric, she's just Gran, teaching them how to take care of their pets, preparing them home-cooked meals, and providing them with care, attention, and love. Then, one day, Gran brings home a child to stay with the family. Iris, silent, hollow-eyed, skittish, and feral, does not behave like a normal girl. Still, Vi is thrilled to have a new playmate. She and Eric invite Iris to join their monster club, where they catalog all kinds of monsters and dream up ways to defeat them. She and Vi and Eric do everything together. Ride their bicycles, go to the drive-in, meet at their clubhouse in secret to hunt monsters. Because, as Vi explains, monsters are everywhere. 2019. Lizzie Shelley, the host of the popular podcast Monsters Among Us, is traveling to Vermont, where a young girl has been abducted and a monster sighting has the town in an uproar. She's determined to hunt it down because Lizzie knows better than anyone that monsters are real, and one of them is her very own sister. One thing I can say is that I've read this author before. Her novel, The Winter People, had a similar structure in that it was divided into parallel narratives separated by a large expanse of time, and she handles that kind of split narrative wonderfully. So I'm quite enjoying this one so far. I do see certain hints of Frankenstein in it, even as early in the novel as I am, but it's not just a knockoff or a simple retelling, so there's a lot to like about it. And the other one we're reading for the book club is The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This one I haven't read yet, though I've been hearing some good things, so I'm rather looking forward to it. Let me go ahead and read the description of this one. Mexican Gothic meets Rebecca in this debut supernatural suspense novel set in the aftermath of the Mexican War of Independence, about a remote house, a sinister haunting, and the woman pulled into their clutches. During the overthrow of the Mexican government, Beatrice's father was executed and her home destroyed. When handsome Don Rodolfo Solorzano proposes, Beatrice ignores the rumors surrounding his first wife's sudden demise, choosing instead to seize the security that his estate in the countryside provides. She will have her own home again, no matter the cost. But Hacienda San Isidro is not the sanctuary she imagined. When Rodolfo returns to work in the capital, visions and voices invade Beatrice's sleep. The weight of invisible eyes follows her every move. Rodolfo's sister Juana scoffs at Beatrice's fears, but why does she refuse to enter the house at night? Why does the cook burn copal incense at the edge of the kitchen and mark the doorway with strange symbols? What really happened to the first Doña Solorzano? Beatrice knows only two things for certain. Something is wrong with the hacienda, and no one there will save her. Desperate for help, she clings to the young priest, Padre Andres, as an ally. No ordinary priest, Andres will have to rely on his skills as a witch to battle the malevolent presence haunting the hacienda. Far from a refuge, San Isidro may be Beatrice's doom. So, of course, we don't know all of the details just from the description, but it sounds like the kind of Gothic novel I think we all love to read. I particularly like that it's a period novel, and while my own knowledge of Mexican history isn't what it should be, because I've spent a lot more time studying American and European history, though I do at least know the big picture of the conflicts that comprise the Mexican War of Independence. Anyway, I do think the historic setting really helps a Gothic novel, both because it reminds us of history, which is worthwhile in its own right, and because it eliminates the modern technological advantages we have these days that, unfortunately, all too often, but not always, undercut the kind of tension and horror that I really want from a Gothic novel. For all those reasons, I'm looking forward to digging into The Hacienda as soon as I finish Children on the Hill. Next up, we have Roger Zelazny's A Night in the Lonesome October. This is another one that's become a sort of classic, and a lot of people like to read it every October. In fact, the book is structured in such a way that each chapter corresponds with one day throughout the month of October. So a lot of people like to read one chapter per day. I think that's a great way to approach this book, and that's exactly how I'm approaching reading it this year. So I'm reading it in parallel with all the others. For those who don't know the book, let me read the description. This darkly sparkling amalgam of horror, humor, mystery, and fantasy was first published in 1993, Roger Zelazny's last book prior to his untimely death. It has inspired not only many fans to read it every year in October, a chapter a day, but also Neil Gaiman's brilliant story, Only the End of the World Again. Okay, so that doesn't tell us all that much, but to sum it up without spoilers, the novel is told from the perspective of Snuff, Jack the Ripper's watchdog. But along the way, we find that when the moon is full on Halloween, the boundary between worlds thins, and we're ultimately treated to a sort of Lovecraftian adventure. It's very much worth reading. Unfortunately, it was Zelazny's final work, so there's also a sort of bittersweet element to it. With regard to the title, A Night in the Lonesome October is taken from a line in Edgar Allan Poe's poem, Ulalume. And Zelazny wasn't the only author to borrow that line for a title, which leads us directly to our next suggestion. That book is Night in the Lonesome October, as opposed to A Night in the Lonesome October, by one of the grandmasters of horror, the late great Richard Lehman. Though I suspect many, if not most of you, have probably read at least one or two of Lehman's works in the past, I don't think this is his best known, so let's start by just reading the description. Everything changed for Ed that day in the fall semester when he got a letter from Holly, the girl he loved. "Dear Ed," it began, "I will always cherish the times we had." Holly was in love with someone else. It was as if his whole world had changed in a second. That night, heartbroken and half mad with despair, Ed couldn't sleep, so he decided to go for a walk. But it's a dark, scary night in the lonesome October, and Ed is not alone. There are others out there in the night, roaming the streets, lurking in the darkness, waiting to show Ed just how different his world could be. Some of them are enticing, like the beautiful girl who wants to teach Ed about the wonders of the night. Some are disturbing and threatening. Some are deadly and in search of prey. So, if you know the author's work, you know this is classic Lehman stuff. I've always thought many of his works had a sort of Halloweeny sort of feel to them, even if they weren't set around our favorite time of year. But that this one is indeed set on A Night in the Lonesome October, it seems like a perfect choice. We're coming up to the end now, with just 2 more books left to recommend. Before I get to those, let me once again remind you to like and share this video. That really helps me grow my audience. And for your own sake, do go ahead and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you have a vastly increased probability of finding my stuff again in the future. I'm always talking about horror, not just around Halloween, so you don't want to miss any of what I have planned. Getting back to the business at hand, though, the next one I've chosen is a new book that just came out a couple months ago, and that's Clown in a Cornfield 2, Friendo Lives by Adam Caesar. This is a sequel to the author's Bram Stoker award-winning Clown in a Cornfield. I have read the first one, but not this sequel yet. But if it's half as good as its predecessor, it should be pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and read the description for you, but I warn you, it does contain mild spoilers for the first book. Nothing too major, but it does give a few things away. So, if you don't want to be spoiled, maybe mute the sound on the video or skip ahead for maybe about 30 seconds. That's your fair warning. Here we go. After barely making it out of the Kettle Springs cornfields alive, Quinn's first year of college in Philadelphia should seem safe and easy. All she wants is to forget what happened and be a normal kid again. But instead, Quinn's past won't leave her alone, as she becomes the focus of a host of online conspiracy theories that claim to prove that the Kettle Springs massacre never happened. It's a deranged but relentless fantasy, and there's nothing Quinn can do to get people to hear the truth, not even on her own campus. So when murderous clowns simultaneously target Quinn at a college party while another goes after her father back in Missouri, Quinn realizes that the facts alone are never going to save her. Her only option is to go back home, back into the cornfields, back to where the nightmare began, to set the record straight the only way she knows how. Because when the truth gets lost, that's when people start to die. It's an all-new horror classic about what happens when the truth is the last thing we want to believe, from Bram Stoker award winner and master of thrills and chills, horror legend Adam Caesar. I like that this one leans into conspiracy theories a little bit. It also makes me a bit nervous. Conspiracy theories are great fodder for a horror novel, but there's been a trend recently for people to write really preachy political horror that prioritizes the political message above quality storytelling. This is meant to be a fun video, so I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus for now, but I think we've all read a few of those. However, I have never been disappointed by an Adam Caesar book, so I trust that he's handled it the right way, and it should be a lot of fun to read. I'll also mention that for some reason it's marketed as a young adult book, and frankly I think the markets have lost their minds. In their infinite wisdom, the publishers seem to have decided that any book with a young protagonist is a young adult book, rather than marketing books in accordance with reading level or subject matter like they ought to. But that's just marketing hocus pocus. The fact of the matter is, Clown in a Cornfield was a great sort of slasher book that's just as good for adults as for teens, and arguably even more so. I assume the sequel will be the same way. And now we come to our final selection. And as much as this is a horror-centric channel, y'all know that I occasionally venture into horror-adjacent topics, and this is one such occasion, because I've actually chosen a mystery rather than a horror novel. But it's a really good mystery, and perfect for Halloween, and that's Halloween Party, a Poirot novel by the Queen of Mystery herself, Agatha Christie. I think we all have a pretty good idea of who Hercule Poirot is and what Agatha Christie novels are all about. There's even a fair chance some of you have read this one, but because it centers on our favorite holiday, I think it's the perfect way to round out our list. As I've done with the others, let me read the description off the back for you. At a Halloween party, Joyce, a hostile 13-year-old, boasts that she once witnessed a murder. When no one believes her, she storms off home. But within hours, her body is found, still in the house, drowned in an apple bobbing tub. That night, Hercule Poirot is called in to find the evil presence. But first, he must establish whether he is looking for a murderer or a double murderer. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say this is Christie's finest work, objectively speaking. But subjectively, it is one of my favorites, because as much as I love anything Poirot is in, I have a particular fondness for the Halloween setting of this one, and it really is a lot of fun. And if you want to double the fun, after you finish reading it, you can watch the film adaptation starring David Suchet. It was in season 12 of the wonderful series Agatha Christie's Poirot. Now we come at last to the end of this new annual tradition for me. I hope you'll join me in reading or rereading at least some of these excellent books. Stay tuned for more Halloween stuff on this channel as I continue tending to all of my own spooky business. But until then, take care and stay scared.